bet I kicked it when I came through.
Yeah, you know, it doesn't snap in anyway.
Yeah, try that.
Check. 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 Is it working?
Yep.
Sure. Well, a little bit down, like maybe in the right
Here?
Yeah, very good.
All right.
And it's on.
Okay.
Let's get a clip. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. We're good to go. Hey, thanks everyone for your patience while we sort out some technical bits, and welcome to the Thesis and Dissertation Preparation Workshop. My name is Scott Kirkby. I'm the Assistant Dean of the Graduate School, and that's my contact information, kirkby@etsu.edu, and my graduate school phone number, 8638. If you try to email me, don't forget the second K in my last name. Kirby@etsu is a valid email address, and I'll never see it, and you won't get a response. So we're here to talk about thesis and dissertation and the electronic thesis and dissertation system. So I'm going to repeat myself a lot, and I'm going to say read the catalog, read the catalog, read the catalog. We're going to look at your program start to finish, especially when we're concentrating on theses and dissertations. The actual requirements for your program are often specific to that program, so we're going to do generalities today. I'm going to encourage you to look at the graduate catalog, talk to your graduate coordinator, talk to your thesis chair, to get the specific details. So, first task in your thesis or dissertation project is to select a topic and to form a committee. What interests you about your discipline? It's usually better to pick a thesis topic that's something that you like rather than something you think is important. Why? Because over your time working on your project, you're going to have to put an awful lot of work into it with not a lot of positive interaction until the end. You know, we don't say good job until you're done. And so if you don't enjoy what you're working on, it's just that much harder to do a good job at it. So discuss the topic with the faculty member who has similar interests. Make sure that you have someone on board that can give you some guidance as to what's realistic and what's possible and what's doable in the time frame of what you're doing with the resources that you have available. In the sciences, this tends to get very limited because you need a very specific set of resources to be able to complete your thesis project research, but it applies as well in other areas. For example, if you need access to a very specific manuscript that's not available electronically and you just can't travel to the other side of the world to gain access to it, no matter how interesting that topic is, you're probably just not going to be able to successfully complete that in the time and resources that you have. So select a chair, find somebody diligent, interested, and with whom you work well. I would like to say that every member of the graduate faculty is highly motivated to help mentor students successfully to completion. And I can say that, but the unfortunate reality is that not everybody is as highly motivated as everybody else. And so find someone that you can work well with. Not everyone will have the same degree of positive interaction with every faculty member, so find someone that's a good fit for you, that their style of mentoring you through your thesis and dissertation project will fit with the style of mentoring that you need. I'll use myself as an example. I tend to be very hands-off. I don't give orders, I give suggestions. Sometimes that works really well with students. I think you should do this. Sometimes I have to re-explain when I said I think you do this. I really meant check it out, just don't ignore me. Other people are very much, you must do this, this, and this by this set of dates. If you don't have it done, I'm done with you. Find someone whose management style, whose leadership style, mentoring style fits what will work well for you. So, select a committee. Same criteria. Look for people who will help you. A committee member who just shows up for your defense and provides essentially no feedback, but whether you passed or failed, will fill the criteria for being a member of your committee, but won't be as useful as someone who can really provide some serious guidance into how to write your thesis or dissertation well and to fill the holes that your thesis chair may have overlooked. Many programs have additional criteria for how to select. Again, I'll use chemistry and myself. Chemistry, you have to have one of the two people on a master's thesis in addition to your chair be an expert in that discipline as well, so they can provide some technical guidance. Other programs have similar kinds of limitations. Just joining us, could you make sure that you sign in so that we can keep track of who you are? So, once you have your committee identified, work with your graduate coordinator, work with your graduate program specialist to fill out the necessary forms. This university, like every university, has a bureaucracy. The bureaucracy lives and dies with its paperwork. You have to have the paperwork completed on time in order to make things move along. So you need the committee form, and you can't have that after the fact. One of the things we have to do is to make sure that the members of your committee are actually qualified to serve on your committee. If you have your defense and one of your committee members wasn't qualified, guess what? You didn't really have your defense. You got to do it again. So, candidacy form notifies the graduate school that you're in the latter parts of your graduate program and that you're close to thesis and dissertation writing. We also need a program of study. It presents the plan of courses that you'll need to meet your degree requirements. This is not just a formality. Some programs have very complex requirements for the degree. If you overlook something, it's a lot easier if we find out quickly than right before you think you're going to graduate. Unfortunately, almost every semester, someone who thinks they're going to graduate gets told, no, you didn't have this required course. You're going to have to hang around until that course is available. That adds a little extra expense, like a whole semester's worth of tuition and fees extra expense if you haven't done that. So, turn in these forms by the end of your first year. If possible, keep dated stamped copies. Unfortunately, forms sometimes go astray, so if you have dated and date stamped copies, it helps us regenerate stuff that's gone missing. Make sure that you make changes to your program of study before you register for thesis and dissertation hours. The paperwork's a lot easier than if you try to do it afterwards. So many programs require that you write a prospectus before you can actually begin your project. So it will depend on your discipline. So talk to your thesis advisor, your committee chair. Construct a document that your committee can approve. Every prospectus I've ever seen is a multi-draft effort. There will be changes that your committee will demand, but if you give them something that they can't approve, you're going to keep working until they approve it. So meet regularly with your committee and your thesis chair to keep them posted regarding your progress. Graduate school, your thesis and dissertation project, very different than taking a class. The deadlines are a lot more amorphous, a lot further apart, don't quite seem so rigorous, but time can escape you very quickly when you're not paying attention. Other approvals. If you do anything related to human subject research, in biomedicine, that can be fairly obvious. You're actually working with human samples of things, but even in the humanities, if you interview someone and you include any part of that interview or knowledge from that interview, you are potentially doing human subject research. So anything that involves a human being in any way, shape, or form might be human subject research. You also need to, if you involve animals, controlled substances like drugs, DNA, radiation, hazardous materials, all require additional approvals. 4, IRB, it's the Institutional Research Board, is responsible for human subject research on this campus. If you involve human subject research, you either need their approval for that research or you need them to exempt you from their approval. No one else but the IRB can provide you with an exemption if your project involves human subject research. Do you need an approval? Go to the website and follow their facts. They will let you know what's going on. If you do need approval, fill out the documentation with the help of your research advisor, get your project approved. What happens if you have human subject research and you do not get IRB approval? Well, it depends on what point that the system finds out about that. At the very least, whatever research you did before you had approval will never see the light of day. You can't publish it, which means effectively it didn't happen as far as your dissertation project goes. Also, it is just plain illegal to do human subject research without IRB approval. If someone complains, you could be looking at criminal penalties, civil penalties. It's just someplace you don't want to go. Yes?
Okay, so I know for basic IRB training, you have a month from when you turn it into when the committee meets again.
Yes.
If you're doing an exempt study, how long does it usually take for them to approve it?
Depends on
Time frame?
similar time frame, though they tend to be a little slower in the summer months. Sure. The question was, for exempt research, how long does it take them to typically process an exemption? Is it comparable to the month between meetings for non-exempt research? And my experience is yes, for exempt research, it takes a comparable amount of time, with them being a little longer in the summer. So if you are doing human subject research, do not leave it till right before you want to start to get your paperwork into the IRB. There are delays in the system. And just because they're slow doesn't grant you any exceptions to the rules. Okay. Do not collect data before you've completed these steps. Again, civil criminal penalties can apply to unapproved human subject research. Okay. If you're working with animals, you have to follow the appropriate laws. Similar with radiation or hazardous materials, there's required training for use of these materials for programs like in the sciences or chemistry, for example, where you're dealing with hazardous materials on a regular basis. These are not unusual things. So those programs have the required training programs in place. You just need to show up and actually complete the training programs. So once you have all of your research completed, then you can register for thesis and dissertation hours. Once you've registered for that first thesis or dissertation hours, continuous registration is required. So that requires that you be registered during summer. It does not require you to be registered during winter. Okay. So, how to make progress. This is a very personal thing. How long should it take you to write your dissertation? I've seen successfully written theses in under 6 weeks. I've seen them take multiple years and never really reach completion. It is important that you find a structure that will allow you to advance on your project. Every graduate student has multiple demands on their time. You lead busy lives, plus many of you that have GAs have teaching responsibilities or other supervisory responsibilities. So find what works for you. I find that if I can parcel out a chunk of each day to work on a bit of it, that's better, because it's just very difficult for me with all of the demands of my time to say, I'm going to reserve this entire day to be able to work on it. So I take at it piecemeal to work on my things. Other people, an hour gets them nothing, because by the time they start getting into it and start thinking about what they're writing and writing successfully, that hour is almost up. And so they need bigger blocks of time. Use what works for you. It is often useful to schedule yourself time to do that. This is the most important thing graduate students will do in their time in graduate school. Block it off just like it's a meeting, just like it's your teaching, just like it's anything else important in your life. Okay. So, schedule appointments with your thesis. It does work. Take pride in what you write. You've worked incredibly hard to get to the point where you start writing. Master's students, a couple of years. Doctoral students, possibly as many as 5 or more years to get to the point where you're writing. The only thing the outside world will know about the quality of the work that you've done is what's in your final product. If you have meticulously well done research, but your writing is sloppy and haphazard, the world will think that your research is sloppy and haphazard and will assume accordingly. Will the world read it? Probably not the whole world, but the important chunk to the next part in your career probably will. Thanks to electronic publishing, like our Digital Commons project here, it is very easy for the next step in your career to find your thesis, look at that PDF, and draw a quick judgment as to what they think the quality of your work is. The average thesis and dissertation in our Digital Commons repository is downloaded 10 times. It's not just the next student working on that project in your research group who's doing that. Okay. I think the record for the most downloads is what, 34,000 roughly?
I don't have that number memorized, but it's up there.
It's, yeah, I'm not sure the exact one, but it's in the several dozen thousand. Okay. So, aim for an active voice. Simple declarative sentences never go wrong. Long, convoluted sentences rarely win any points on the reviewers. Think of your committee. If your writing makes your review committee's job more difficult, they're likely to make your life more difficult. If you make their review process easier, they're likely to make your life easier. So, the first chapter or so is usually a literature review section. This is a summary of the current state of the research on your topic. For popular topics, you can't do a completely 100% comprehensive literature review on every possible angle of that topic because you would take volumes and volumes to do that. So you need to use your judgment to focus on what is most relevant to your project at hand and do a thorough review of that. So connect it to your contribution. Make this section matter. It's not just a bit of trivia to check off. When I'm reviewing a thesis for one of the students I serve on a committee for, that will help me understand whether the importance of what you're doing and why you bothered to do that. Right? Again, if this is going to be read by potential future employers, potential PhD admissions committees, potential future research advisors, make it count. So, go to the original work. Do not rely on encyclopedias, online sources of dubious quality, or textbooks. Anything of unknown provenance, I would recommend you don't even bother with it. So, Wikipedia, unless you're doing a thesis topic on the usage or the content authoring of Wikipedia, probably should never be mentioned. Okay. About 15 years ago, when Wikipedia was fairly new, there was, what we believe, a chemical engineer in the UK who purposely polluted the physical chemistry portions of Wikipedia with false information. We think he was in the UK because of the style of the writing and how he presented the physical chemistry. We don't know what his motivations were, but we do think he was somehow connected to a Wikipedia author because his false information would get back on faster than people could correct it. And no matter how many complaints were made to Wikipedia editors, he was allowed to continue to update until eventually it just got tired. Never trust that Wikipedia author is knowledgeable or even honest in what they're presenting. So, go to the original sources. So, academic misconduct. I'd rather not talk about it, but we must. Fabrication, plagiarism, or other practices that deviate from these commonly accepted bits for proposing, conducting, or reporting research, never a good thing. There is no statute of limitations on academic misconduct when it comes to your thesis and dissertation. The longest case between acceptance of a thesis and its retraction because of plagiarism that I am aware of is approximately 30 years. It's a PhD thesis in education. It was retracted within 6 months of the person's planning on retirement. That's why it had such a long gap. His employer sued him for back wages, claiming false hiring, and won. It bankrupted the guy. So no pension, no savings, no nothing, and he was very close to retirement. You know, just because you think you got away with it, who knows? There is no statute of limitations. We can always come back if there is a valid complaint. Just don't do it. Make sure you understand what is and is not acceptable practice. So, Fabrication and plagiarism does not include honest error or differences in interpretation and judgment. But if you're never sure, an extra reference, an extra set of quotation marks is rarely a problem compared to the lack of those things. So, dishonest reporting of facts, fabricating results, changing data, negligence in collecting data, selective reporting, omitting conflicting data. These are among the common problems. Research usually requires a degree of expectation of honesty. The reason why we treat this so seriously is once you've proven you're dishonest in this, how can anyone, including any potential future employer, ever trust anything you're ever going to represent? The system can't have someone looking over your shoulder all the time. So even minor infractions get treated incredibly seriously because of it. So plagiarism, using or taking credit for the work or ideas of others without proper acknowledgement or permission. Make sure that you understand what you're doing. Again, an extra reference is rarely a problem compared to a missed one. Abuse of confidentiality or legitimate expectations of confidentiality may or may not be a problem. If you have human subject research, make sure that your release that your humans are signing is accurate reflection of what you're going to do. It is completely 100% legitimate to identify your human subjects if that is what they have consented to do. It is not legitimate to identify them, even indirectly, if they have been promised complete confidentiality. Make sure that what you do is what you promised. Also, understand the power of Google, especially when you're human subject research and you're dealing with small sample sizes. It is incredibly easy to find a 24-year-old white male who teaches English at an elementary or at a high school in East Tennessee who also has a hobby of playing backgammon in league sports. And that's a completely made up example, but it's the kind of thing that you can do when schools put their teachers' names, ages, academic credentials on their websites, when people with social media will put their hobbies, especially if they're competitive at these things. It's really easy to connect the dots. Right? If you are doing anything that you've promised confidentiality and the person isn't, can you guarantee there won't be any repercussions to that person? No, of course not. That's why these things are important. That teacher says something uncomplimentary about that principal makes sure that their contract isn't renewed. Again, made up example, but these are the things. Someone talks very candidly about their experiences dealing with drug abuse or other things. Their employer says, I don't want somebody like that on my staff. It's too publicly embarrassing. These things are issues you have to make sure you get right. So, misrepresentation of research, including the progress of your research to your committee. Oh yeah, I'm almost done. 3 years later, you're still almost done. Isn't quite that throwaway comment, but if you said you did something and you didn't, you can be fired by your research advisor for that. So, also including material that will mislead. Yeah, technically you didn't lie, but you misdirected so willfully, we're not going to care about the difference. So, obviously, violations of federal, state, and local laws, as well as university requirements, cannot be tolerated. We can't turn a blind eye to crimes. Most employees on this campus have an obligation, if they're aware of a crime, to report it to their supervisor. That includes misuse of taxpayer funds for badly behaved research. Okay, so avoiding academic misconduct so that you won't have to have an unpleasant discussion with your research advisor, your graduate coordinator, the chair of your department, possibly me and Dr. McIntosh. So accurately present their findings and their sources, take good notes to document the sources, use Turnitin. So all theses that go to our EDT system, all dissertations have to go through the Turnitin system, but you can use Turnitin in advance to check for anything you've overlooked. Okay. So get your thesis chair to create a Dropbox for a thesis course. It is best if you are going to look at draft versions using Turnitin that you make sure that your thesis chair doesn't set it to log these things to the Turnitin database. Otherwise, it's going to start reporting that you're plagiarizing yourself when you check the next draft, which it does, unfortunately, and will make it essentially impossible to track improvements. So, writing assistance, look for the Center of Academic Achievement. So it's the first floor of the Sherrod. Provide assistance with style and grammar. It's not an editing service. The people who staff that are well-versed in technical writing, but they're not well-versed in the technology or technical aspects of your discipline. So they can help you with the writing in general sense, not in the specifics for your subject. Also, Thesis and Dissertation scholarships. The announcement will be going out for the spring semester very shortly. We also, mid-spring semester, make them available for summer. They will pay for up to 6 hours of readings and research, thesis and/or dissertation in your last semester. So it's a nice big perk, especially if you have to finish up in the summer when GAs and the like are rarely available. So we also offer an extended thesis and dissertation boot camp. The information is available on the graduate school website. If you are struggling to successfully complete your dissertation in a reasonable amount of time, they can help you with that writing and help you schedule your time. It's in the library, free of distractions, and it operates on several weekends throughout the semester. Okay, nearing the end, file your intent to graduate with the graduate school. Remember, intents to graduate expire at the end of every semester, so you have to file one for each semester. So if you filed one for this semester, but you're not going to make it till spring, you need to file a new one for the spring. If you filed one for the summer and you're here, you need to file one for next spring because you've already missed the deadline, unfortunately. So make sure that you have your paperwork in on time. You also need to schedule your oral defense. You need to submit that notification of oral examination to the grad school with a copy of your abstract, with a schedule for when it will be, so that we can obtain an outside observer for you. An outside observer is a faculty member of the graduate faculty who will make sure that the process of your defense is followed. They will rarely ask questions, though for public presentation parts of theses defense they're entitled to, but their job there is not to make sure your committee does anything in particular, just to make sure the rules of how a defense is supposed to operate are followed successfully. Okay. So, distributed copies of theses and dissertation to all your committee members. It is always a good thing that if your department doesn't have a specific policy of when you need to do this in advance of your defense, that you ask your committee members well in advance, when's their cutoff time. The shortest defense I ever participated in was less than 5 minutes because we walked in, student tried to give us a copy of the thesis when we walked in. It took us about 5 minutes to decide whether we would bother to hear them out as to why they were doing it right then and there, or whether we'd just say fail and get on with the rest of our day. Okay. I personally will not pass any defense that I haven't had at least a week to read because it requires that amount of time for me to read the thesis and be able to participate constructively in a defense. Many faculty have similar kinds of cutoffs. Don't leave it to the last second. I've never heard of a successful case of leaving it to the last second. I'm sure it must exist, I've just never heard of it. So, defend your thesis. This is a departmental specific process. It usually involves a public presentation similar to a departmental seminar, and then a question and answer period, sometimes public, often concluding with a private session for just your committee for an examination, but sometimes it's just a single open question and answer session. How long does your defense take? As long as it takes. Again, the shortest one I had was about 5 minutes. That was unsuccessful. The longest that I have firsthand knowledge of was about 6 hours. That was a PhD defense. That student was successful in that one. It takes as long as it takes. Okay, so your outside observer will submit the oral defense report form. It basically asserts that your committee was present and that they followed the process. Okay. So, make changes to your thesis and dissertation that your committee have required of you after your defense. Most theses require at least some changes because your committee members will not agree on everything the first time usually. It's not uncommon for two committee members to completely disagree on how a sentence should be phrased, though it can be a little annoying, of course, when they're arguing over things like shall versus may, or can versus will. But these corrections do need to be made to the satisfaction of the majority of your committee. The chair and the committee approvals needed before submitting your thesis and dissertation to the graduate school for review. So, electronic submission and approval. Electronic submission is required because it will be archived in the digital commons. We do not archive physical theses anymore. Okay, ETS, our electronic thesis and dissertation system, improves access. For better or worse, it gives that potential employer a chance to read what you did. We also allows non-text inclusion, so we can include visual components, tables, graphs, pictures, audio, video, etc. I can't speak personally about audio and video, but the idea that you can take this graph that is standard size on a page and expand it so it's legible on a computer screen in your PDF, really helpful on trying to get your data, especially make your visuals publication quality. If you take that same graph and it's all pixelated, when you expand it up to a reasonable size, you've just failed to impress that potential employer. Okay. Take advantage of it if your research or your dissertation project makes use of alternate media. Including these in your thesis can really enhance the final product. Get support early. Ms. Red, our thesis and dissertation coordinator, will do everything that's humanly possible to help you meet deadlines, but she can't perform miracles. She can't do a week of work in 5 minutes. And what our average load is, several dozen theses per semester. And your crisis is probably matched with a dozen other students' crises, not all of which can be solved instantaneously. Again, miracles are not possible. So missed deadlines are missed deadlines. So get support early. We'd rather prevent problems than fix them. The system, I think, is easy to use, but I've had my students use it for a number of years. I'm familiar with it. My students report that there's a learning curve to it, and so it takes some effort. Get support early. So approval, your manuscript represents a blending of disciplinary and graduate school formatting guidelines. The goal is to create a stable, sophisticated, comprehensive final document. Make sure you obtain permission for use of copyrighted material. A thesis is a publication, a dissertation is a publication. Copyright must be respected. This isn't a fancy lab report or term paper. Holders of those copyrights have the right to that material, and inclusion in a thesis is rarely covered for an image in fair use. So modified materials need to be cited as adapted. Modifications rarely will accept trivial. So you change your blue line to a green line and call it adapted. I'm probably not going to accept that. I don't think anybody would accept that, including your committee. So follow the formatting guidelines in the thesis and dissertation guide for front and end matter. There are 2 accepted formats. The standard format, regular thesis, starting with chapter 1, moving through your sections, and the alternate format. So the standard format, formatting guidelines, your discipline, American Chemical Society, Chicago Manual Style, American Philosophical Association, Modern Languages Association, and so on and so forth for your discipline. Remember that the APA, in fact, most modern manuals, if they've been updated in the last 10 years, now require the unique document identifier, the DOI code, to go with electronic citations. Website URLs are rarely a complete citation for an electronically published journal. It's the DOI with the proper reference, not just a URL. So it's often handy to use another thesis or dissertation in your program as a guide, but don't use it as a hard and fast rule. Your thesis should be one single document that's in the system. We do not do multiple documents. It's a final PDF. How you get that final PDF is a technical problem without one single solution. It is sometimes easier to put PDFs together into a single final file rather than trying to take, for example, Word and print everything with a large number of figures and photographs into a single PDF, just because Word does not like very large files. The PDFs can sometimes go strangely huge, but the final PDF must be a usable PDF to do that. Right? The alternate format has to be approved by your program. It consists of a beginning and end chapters that are the same as the standard ones, so usually something along the lines of chapter 1 is a literature review and the final chapter is a discussion of your results. The middle chapters are in the format of selected and accepted journals in the discipline. This is especially easy to do if you already have published papers on your thesis work. Okay. So in the thesis and dissertation formatting guidebook, there are complete set of specifications that are required. So 2 things. The only good thesis is a finished thesis. Until it's finished, it's not a good thesis yet. And you can do this. Every one of us who's graduated from a program have done it. You can too. So, any questions? Yes?
You said that research involving human subjects that is not approved is illegal. Do you mean affiliated research?
I mean that if you directly involve human subjects, you either need IRB approval or an IRB exemption.
But once we leave the institution, that is no longer the case, correct?
All human subject research governed by federal rules, so whatever you're doing, you would have to comply with those federal laws, whether it's here or somewhere else. Sure. So the question for online was, is human subject research, affiliated human subject research, governed by IRB approval? Each institution has its own institutional review board, and every bit of human subject research in the United States is governed by federal human subject research laws, and they would apply whether you're at a private company or at another university, but how the paperwork works at those other entities is up to their institutional review board.
I was clarifying that when we are no longer affiliated with anyone, though.
With anyone?
Yes.
It's private research then?
Yes.
I'm not enough of an expert in human subject research to speak knowledgeably on that. So again, private research is different. I mean, for example, journalism is not human subject research. You interview someone for a newspaper article, that's not human subject research. But again, I'm not enough of authority. I would direct questions to IRB about private research. But as a student of this institution, you do not have private research until you're no longer a student of this institution. Okay. Other questions? Okay. So I'm on the original schedule, if not the full 45 minutes, so I'll turn it over to Ms. Red.
Okay, we're going to take a break. The next section will start at 3. And the next section is kind of like a nuts and bolts for those of you who are, it's really post-defense type stuff. So if you don't want to hear all that, if you're not even writing yet, it's a lot of information to take in. You can always come back. We've got these once a semester. But there is a little more elaboration about the formatting in this next section. So if you want to know that ahead of time, you can say, but I suggest you come back not get overwhelmed, but you're here, so it's up to you.
I would suggest it's a good investment in your time and will save you a lot of grief with your committee to get your formatting right before it goes to your committee, not afterwards. So.
Okay, yeah. Okay. All good? All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you all for being here in the room. Thank you all for joining us online streaming. My name is Emily Redd. I'm the Thesis Dissertation Coordinator for the School of Graduate Studies. And this is surviving the submission process. And I say surviving because it's a lot going on at this time of the semester. If you have submitted, defended, and now you're trying to submit, it's a lot going on right there at the end of the semester. So, but it can be done. And we're going to talk about everything you need to do to get through it. So we're going to look at the paperwork required for the submission process, what's involved with uploading, the review process, the editing process, and then, of course, final approval. And this is informal, you guys. You're just 4 of you in the room. And for those of you online, email Rebecca any of your questions, and we'll get back to you right away. She had some technical difficulties here in the room and had to leave, but we'll get back to you. So you guys can ask, and we'll keep going. All right, paperwork. There were handouts sent to those online yesterday, and those of you in your room have received a packet. The checklist of requirements is the first page in your packet, and that's essentially what we're going to be touching on. Everything in that checklist we're going to look at as we go through this PowerPoint. Okay, so we're going to talk about the Turnitin report first. And before I get into that, everything on your checklist can be done in any order. It's kind of an all-at-once type of thing. So if you can't get something done, if it requires a chair signature, if it requires a chair to help you, you can jump down to the next one and keep working through this checklist. So it's not necessarily an order thing. But I am going to kind of go in order of importance in the PowerPoint just to highlight those things that tend to hold students up and that are important to the submission and to get into the deadline. So one of the 3 things that's important to get yourself in for graduation that semester is the Turnitin report. Curious of those of you here, you already said spring. Those of you here in the room, is anybody trying to graduate this semester? You guys, okay. So I've got the dates here also. I'll mention what dates are the deadlines for this semester. So the Turnitin report needs to be set up by your committee chair. And this is something that the chair can decide to do directly through the Turnitin program, which they have a license through ETSU, directly through Turnitin, but most chairs go through D2L. So your chair will set up a drop box in D2L for you to submit your thesis or dissertation to, and the report will automatically start running. And that's how you'll get it. The reason your chair needs to do this is that students don't have direct access to Turnitin. It's for faculty only, so your chair needs to set that up. And also your chair and you need to be the ones reviewing the report. I don't look at the report, I don't look at the score, doesn't matter to me. The score of the Turnitin report is something for you and your committee chair to look at to be sure you all have met best practice for citations throughout the document. So it's not this grad school thing, if you don't get a less than a 12%, you don't pass. It's nothing like that. It's a tool for you all to use to make sure you've got everything checked off in your document. Okay. There is a 20 megabyte limit to submit to the program. So if you have a lot of figures or any video or audio that's causing your document to be big, you can take those things out because really all that needs to be run through is the text. And just keep it under 20 megabytes. So download the Turnitin report in PDF format and email it to me. Your chair or you can do that, either one of you. Once the report has been run through D2L, it'll be ready to go. You can download it and send to me, but make sure you review it first. Really, it's on you and your committee chair to review that report. That's one of the things that your chair signs off on one of these papers. It says, I have reviewed and examined the Turnitin report. So it's up to you guys to make sure you've done that. But what I will do is just collect the PDF version of that report and file it. Okay. If the Turnitin report itself is 20 megabyte number is popping up here. If the report itself is over 20 megabytes, I can't accept it via email. Our email system won't accept anything over 20, so send it via ETSU Dropbox. There's a lot of ways to send things through Dropbox, like Google or Dropbox itself. I have a few of those accounts personally, but this is a transmission between you and me here at ETSU. So let's keep it all standard through the ETSU Dropbox, and there's a link there for that. Let me mention also, if you all do not sign in online, we won't be able to know you're there, and then we won't be able to know to send you the PowerPoint. So please make sure you log in officially so we know you're there. And you'll get all these links in the PowerPoints. We'll send them to you after. Okay, another big one for this process is the manuscript review form, and this is the second page in your packet. Manuscript review form, very important. I can open this up. All right, at the top of this form is general information about you. The middle section is some information about your discipline. I need to know all of this. I need to know the style guide. These are things I'm going to be checking against. And also, if your chair wants a copy, you can ask him or her if they want a copy of that. Fill that out there. And then the bottom portions where all the signatures go. Your committee chair will agree to those things. I have read and approved the manuscript. I have reviewed the Turn-It-In report, as I mentioned earlier, and also that it conforms to the departmental style guide and the grad school style guide. Your chair will sign, your committee members will sign, and you will sign. Okay, so this is one of the ones that I need right there at the deadline. This is an important one. Okay, also note at the very top, see, we've had to squeeze some things in over the years because this form is kind of hefty here. So at the very top is often missed, but this is very important. This yes or no question, grade change question. If this grade is not changed from SP to S, the graduation office will not have you on the list for the graduation ceremony. So they need to know that you are now converted over to an S. Our office is good with doing that. Most chairs opt to say yes, have the grad school go ahead and change it over upon completion. That's what this question's all about. Do you want us to do it, or do you want your department to do it upon completion? So make sure that's filled out yes or no. Should be a yes most of the time. Okay, all signatures are required, yes. Gathering signatures. If you're operating in the summer, I hone in on this a lot because it's very difficult to get a hold of all your committee members to get signatures, and you're there at the deadline and you may not have everything and it could hold you up. There are a couple of different ways to get these signatures. If you happen to be completely perfect at your defense, you probably won't be, but if your committee is happy and they've got add a comma here, you know, just minor things for you to fix, they may be ready to go ahead and sign your manuscript review form at your defense. You can go ahead and knock that out with all of them in the room. So see if that can happen for you. Some departments facilitate the signatures for you. They'll walk the paper around, just find out if that's part of what they do for you. Otherwise, some of your committee members may do that for you, and otherwise it's up to you to hunt everybody down. So if there are issues getting a signature, and like I said, some faculty take off in the summer, or they can take off in the fall or spring also, but if they happen to take off, they're not in the country, you can't get a signature, I do accept a clear scan. So if you have everybody else sign, scan it in, email it to your committee member, have them sign it, and then they can scan it back to me. That will work. Okay, we'll make it work. Okay, uploading. Convert the final manuscript to PDF. This is something I hope all of you have done before. Has anybody not converted it to PDF before? Okay. I suggest converting to PDF before you're ready to submit, just in case things go crazy. Word and Adobe hang out together and play a little better than they used to, but sometimes there's, because what Adobe does is it interprets what it thinks the Word document is doing, so if it thinks there's a big gap there, it's going to throw it in. So look at your PDF before you submit. Go ahead and convert, page through it, make sure everything's still stable, and your table didn't end up on page 52 when it was supposed to be on page 12. Okay, then you're going to go to the ETD website and click on Get Account. I've got a screenshot in the next slide to show you what this looks like. But the ETD website is an offshoot of the grad school website. I've got the link here. What you'll do is you'll go to the site and you'll click on Get Account, and you will create an account and log in. And I want to note here before we look at what that looks like, this is a separate procedure than the uploading to D2L to run the Turnitin report. I note that because I've had a handful of students say, well, I've already uploaded my thesis. And they thought they made the deadline. But what they did was upload the thesis or dissertation to D2L to run the report, and then they just took off. And no, I didn't get it because it's not on Digital Commons. It's two different places. So when you go to the ETD site, you click on Get Account, you will see this. To create your account, and I have it cut off here, sorry I shouldn't, but at the top it says Digital Commons at East Tennessee State University. That is the repository where all theses and dissertations for ETSU are held. That's the account you're creating to become a part of that repository. So I'll talk about that in a minute. But on the right it says Create New Account. Do I have a pointer? Yeah, okay. So this is not real easy to see, but here's where you will create your account. This is not linked to your ETSU account, so you need to create something different. You can, or you can use your ETSU email and your ETSU password just to keep it all, all the same, and so you can remember it. But this is not linked into the ETSU accounts. So to sign up, you will enter an email address and then a password. And then you come back here and log in. Once you log in, you'll click on Submit Research down here on the left side. These instructions that I just said are on the checklist toward the bottom. It will remind you to click on Submit Research and do all those things, so that's there to follow when you get there. All right, once you have logged in, it's going to walk you through some steps. You're going to click on Thesis and Dissertations, you're going to fill in your name, your abstract. Take care with filling in these fields because this is going to create the metadata, is what it's called, the profile for you in the repository. I will be checking that before we finally approve it and it gets sent off and filed forever. But the thing I need your help with is your committee members' names, making sure they're spelled correctly and that all of their salutations are accurate. So take care when you're creating this profile. This is what's going to be on display with your link attached to it. Okay, one more thing before we move on. Those three things, I think I will mention this later, but I want to mention it right here also, that those three things, the Turnitin report, manuscript review form, and the upload of your thesis dissertation are what the deadline is focused on. So the deadline this semester, it will be November 13th is the last day to submit. Those are the three things listed on the academic calendar for that date to submit. Turnitin report, manuscript review form, and upload. These other things that we're going to talk about can trickle in a little bit later. But try to get those three, well, you need to get those three things in by that deadline. There's a little wiggle room, and I'll talk about that a little bit later, but at least the upload needs to get done by that date. All right, continuing, following the checklist. The next thing we're going to look at, some of the things on the checklist may not apply to you, so just skip them, but we're going to look at what all of them are. The next page in your packet is the ETSU ETD release form. I'll just let that be. What that asks you is what kind of access you want for your thesis dissertation in Digital Commons. Do you want it to be released for worldwide access, which is called unrestricted? Do you want it to be restricted to ETSU only, which means only anybody at an ETSU computer can view the full text? Outside of ETSU, they only see the abstract. Or do you want to withhold? Withholding completely does not allow anybody to see the abstract, the full text, or anything for a whole year. And this allows students who are looking to publish time to work with publishers. And that's something that I recommend highly. Some publishers are still okay with you posting it. Most are not at this point. So you can withhold for a year and submit for publishing, or explore that if you've not even thought about it. But that gives you time where your thesis dissertation is not posted to work with them, because some of them are very sticky about it being already out there. So those are your three options. If you're not sure, talk to your committee. They'll have some advice for you. It can be discipline specific. I see a lot of chemistry students choose the restricted access. I see a lot of other sciences and psychology and criminal justice pick the withheld option because they're working with publications throughout their education. I forget the word. They're publishing as they go, so they're used to it. So if there's any questions, but there's descriptions of those on the form. If there's any questions, ask your committee. You can ask me also what that means. So I've also printed out from the checklist, there's a link to instructions on how to fill out the ProQuest form, which is the final page in your packet. Between the ETSU release form and the ProQuest form, I have printed out those instructions for you, because depending on what you pick on the ETSU release form, one of these three will determine how you fill out the UMI agreement form, which is, I need to change that. It's actually called the ProQuest form now. I apologize. I'm going to make a note. Okay. So on the ProQuest form is where you will, and you can look at this as your last page. Pages 4 and 5 are required from that packet. It's a packet that's put together by ProQuest, and ProQuest is the company that we use to produce microfilm, and we still do have microfilm in our library. The current dean still requires that. So, and we also publish with them. They are a very well-known database that most universities subscribe to, so we want to be a part of that also. So for their form, they want to know your publishing options also. And at the very top, there's two options: traditional publishing or open access publishing. Check traditional publishing. Open access publishing will cost you extra money and you don't need it. You achieve open access through our Digital Commons database anyway. You don't need ProQuest to go that extra mile to do that dissemination for you. So traditional publishing will be what you should choose. It's what your microfilm fee will cover. The only fee associated with the submission process, the $45 microfilm fee, covers this option. Otherwise, you're paying more for something you don't need. Okay, so choose traditional publishing. Then you skip down to select publishing options. And this part is where what you chose before, unrestricted, restricted, or withheld, will determine how you fill that out. I'm going to skip that for now because that can get very complicated. If you can read the instructions, it's broken down between unrestricted, restricted, and withheld. You follow it step by step about how to fill out this section, and page 5. There is a part of it that can get a little confusing. Okay, so follow those instructions for that. And then there are other pages in this packet. There's an order form. Actually, back up. As of spring, I've taken that order form out. ProQuest is no longer accepting the paper order form, so never mind. But there was an order form. There's an order form for copyright, however. ProQuest will file a copyright for you with the government, an official copyright. And it's going to cost you an extra, I believe, $10 to file it with ProQuest versus doing it directly with the government, but they'll facilitate that for you if you want to. And you don't need that unless you have something that you need to really, really protect, like an invention or a survey tool that you created that you want to have extra protection on. As soon as your thesis dissertation is posted online, you are the copyright holder no matter what, and it's recognized in a court of law. If someone were to take you to, or if you needed to take someone to, how am I saying this, to court for infringement, if you had a copyright on file, it would speed up the process. So something to consider there, but you don't need, it's just my advice, you don't need to do it. A lot of students think they need to, everybody does it. It's not the case. But look into it if it's something you want to consider. Okay, moving on down the checklist. All of this is on the checklist of requirements. If you went through the IRB office for any reason and received an exemption memo, an approval memo, now they're sending out memos that say we have read what you've submitted and we don't even need to look at it, there's a memo for that. I'll need those memos, whichever memo you received. If you are a PhD candidate, there's a survey of earned doctorates that we will require you to take. We participate in that study, so that's for you all. PhD only, that's not DRPH, that's not EDD. PhD only. And then pay their microfilm fee by the deadline listed in the academic calendar. I don't have that deadline here, but it is closer to the end of the semester. Commencement is on the 16th, and it's the Monday before that. So, but a lot of students do that all at the same time. They turn in their paperwork, and then they go pay the fee. You can pay the fee online. They do it all at the same time, which I recommend, so you don't forget. Okay. All right, permissions. So this is also on the checklist to make sure that you have considered this. If you have used an image that's a direct copy, paste of any kind of image, a table, a graph, maps, artworks, rubrics, any other visual representation of an idea, it needs to be used with permission. Okay? Permissions are also needed for large sections of quoted material. I had a student get held up an entire semester because she had a screenplay in her thesis, and it was the entire screenplay. She had permission to use it, to direct it here at ETSU, to promote it, all that, but she did not have permission to display it in the thesis that would then be posted online. So that had to come out. If you had permission to use a survey instrument but did not have permission to display it, like in your appendices, you need permission to display it. Okay?
So databases like JSTOR and things, those are not considered permissible already, right? Like if I want to use a photograph or a piece of artwork in my thesis, I'll have to then get permission on top of that, right? Even if it's already from a database.
Okay, there are, yes, I'm going to repeat that kind of for the online people. There are, is ArtStore, or there's a JSTOR now?
There's JSTOR.
Okay.
There's other things that do with the library.
Okay, so there are databases now that, that have groupings of visuals, artwork, and infographics, I suppose, that entities, businesses, people will create and put out there for public to use. And that they don't have to go through all those channels to get permissions for. They should list on those websites, and I've been to a few of them to check this out. It's relatively new. I've been trying to catch up on it. What you need to do, if it says free for use, here's the license, here it just says it, it's good to go. All I will need is just you to send me that link or send me a printout of that it shows it's fine to use. Otherwise, sometimes it says contact the artist, and there's their information. Contact the publisher, contact the copyright holder, or it's another word I'm thinking of. I can't think of it right now. But whoever owns the permissions to that work, it'll give you instructions on what to do. But that's a nice, I'm glad they're out there. That's a nice, neat way to consolidate. If you can search that database for works and find it and find exactly how to get permissions rather than just fishing out there in the world. Okay, direct copies is a no-no. And here's something else. Just because it's on the internet, even if it's a photograph of a jacket and you're trying to show the emblem, be careful where you get things from. Websites copy each other and link and link and link. Be careful where you're looking to make sure that that person does not have somebody else's photograph with somebody else's new design on it that nobody has permission for. We really have to be careful. When the internet started, it was a free-for-all. Everybody's like, oh, use whatever. But it's gotten more and more protected. So think in terms of extra protection rather than it being open and available as it used to be, or as at least we thought it used to be. Okay, okay, so citing an image used with permission, I've got an example here on the bottom left. Place a citation at the end of each figure caption for images that were used with permission, and we'll look at this one first. Just say used with permission and then give the citation. If you have a number sequence citation, use that version there. If you've got the name date use that, but just include used with permission and then the name and date. You don't have to give anything else for us, at least for the grad school, other than that. Having said that, if you've contacted someone to use permission and they said, please include all of this in the caption, do that. If they have the name of the gallery or the name of a publisher and they have a link and they have a symbol, whatever they want, do what they ask. If you have something, and now Dr. Kirkby mentioned this in the first session, changing a green line to a red line doesn't necessarily mean you're adapting something, but I've kind of done that a little bit here just to demonstrate. But if you've got something that you have taken and redrawn, you don't need permission, you just need to cite as adapted from or modified from, because the visual representation of that idea is what is unique to the creator. Okay, so if you visually create it differently, it's the same information, but the visuals are different. So for example, if I changed it, now that's a loose change, but it's the example that I have, and I did it pretty quickly. It's now your colors, your shape, that sort of thing. It's the same, think about it as if you're citing a sentence. It's the words, it's the information, you're crediting the source. But here, if you're taking that information and changing it into a visual, the visual itself then becomes a separate entity from the information. So you're citing the information, you created the visual. So you don't need permission at that point. Okay, multimedia. We've not had a lot of multimedia come through, and it's very exciting when it does. We actually had a student win an international award a few years ago that we submitted because she had video throughout her thesis, and it was very exciting to have. These documents are capable of including video and audio, animations, all kinds of other things. If you're ambitious, try it. Get support early, as Dr. Kirkby said in the first session. That's one of the things he started about getting started. If you have any ambitions about turning this thesis into something that you want to use as a resume tool for future employers, think about creating this document in a little more sophisticated way than just a couple of photos or a table and some text, because you can. My little example here is, I hope this works. I could describe to you how cute a little Pomeranian is discovering the snow for the first time, or I could show you. It's just an example of, I'm gonna go over here and click it. There we go. Just for a break. Okay, that's really going fast, but anyway. I don't know why it's hyperspeed, but there he is. Okay, just the fact that it's an option, and I also have audio here also. That's just a bird call. I don't know what's happening to the tech this time, but that's a bird call I inserted there. It's easier to insert these types of things into a PowerPoint than a document. So I consider the technology there about what you need to do to link out to a YouTube video and then have it linked back, or how to embed things. There's a little more complicated process there, but we had a biology student one time, had his whole study done on bird calls, and he had an animatronic bird that he set out in nature and had all these other birds kind of interact with it. And we thought it would be a great opportunity for him to include the video of that, include the audio of what he was talking about. He was describing the bird calls, but he didn't. It was the last minute, and he didn't have any of that to display in his thesis, and we thought it was a missed opportunity. So just a little plug there to consider that if you have time to do that. If you need help, ITS has told me that lynda.com is a good resource. It's something that you have to subscribe to month by month, but it's got great tutorials on it about how to embed things and use multimedia in documents. And also, any workshop that ITS puts on, if you are a GA or a TS, you have access to those. They used to be just for faculty and staff, but if you are a GA or a TS, you can attend any of those workshops on Photoshop, InDesign, Illustrator, all of those. And of course, if you use, if you are videotaping people, make sure that you include this in your IRB submission so that all of that's handled and looked at from a human subject's perspective. Okay, so submit anytime. I say that as long as you have committee approval, everybody's happy, you can submit in February, you can submit in June, you can submit anytime. I will take these submissions anytime, and I encourage that. If you happen to get done early, or if you are right past the deadline, is trickling over into the next semester, don't wait until the next semester's deadline. You can submit as soon as you're ready. If you're submitting right before or on the deadline day, here's what to expect. And again, this semester it is November 13th. The ETDs I receive are reviewed in the order in which they're received. And here's where I'm going to mention this. I must have the Turnitin report, the manuscript review form, and of course your upload in order to start my review. I also need verification from your committee chair that the file you uploaded was the correct committee approved version. I will handle that with your chair. You don't need to worry about that. That's why it's not on the checklist. But we've had students upload, just be careful, uploading from work, uploading from different devices, and they may just set, they have in the past, a few of them here and there have sent me the wrong file. So I cannot be reviewing the wrong file going forward. So your chair is going to double check that I have the right one before we get started. So on the deadline, you have to upload. You have to get the Digital Commons account created and upload, or you won't make the deadline. A lot is happening that week. I submit lists to our program specialists. They get those lists to the graduation office, the printing office. All that's happening to let them know who's going to be attending the graduation ceremony. Regalia is getting processed. All of that's getting processed. So if you miss this deadline, it's not just me saying, well, you missed the deadline, sorry. There are reasons we have a deadline. It's because there's a lot of other offices that are involved. So be sure to upload by midnight on the submission deadline for your semester. That will put you on my list and then start getting you on everybody else's list. If you have trouble with the Turnitin report or the manuscript review form, here's what I'm going to say. It's not listed anywhere, but from me to you, it's okay for those to come in the next day or the next day or the next day. I won't begin my review until I get them, but you'll be hanging out on one of my lists, waiting, pending, but that will still allow you to have made the deadline. Okay? It can't be too late because I need to verify that your committee is in fact done with you, and if I don't get those forms, then then I don't know what the situation is, so it can't go too late. But if you are panicking, say they're always on a Monday, you've uploaded, you can't find your chair to sign that form, or you can't find your chair to facilitate the Turnitin report. This happens every semester. Let me know I'm having trouble, and it can go the next day or the next day, okay? But the upload itself has to be done on the deadline day. Okay. All right, so what am I going to look at? The format check that I will do will be, I'm going to be looking at two different things, some of which are in the thesis guide for the grad school, and some are from your departmental style guide. And we're going to go into detail on these in just the next few slides. But they're just general guidelines for formatting for all theses and dissertations, and then of course how the front and end pages look are a part of that grad school guide. Your departmental guide is going to be your citation style, and some of these APA has a specific way to do headings and subheadings. I'll be looking at that, so follow those guidelines. Okay, these are things, there's a lot that I could go through, but it would take another hour. So these are things that come up often that students ask about. What do I need to do? At least 1-inch margins on all sides, okay. Use a standard font and font size throughout. So the standard font and font size is up to you as long as it's something like Times New Roman, Arial, nothing crazy. When you convert to PDF also, Adobe doesn't like crazy wild fonts, and it may interpret those kind of in a weird way also. So use something standard. All right, for pagination, the numbers are to be Arabic numbers at the bottom of each page. Some disciplines have the Roman numerals down there, and that's not okay for an ETSU thesis or dissertation. Lots of history and liberal studies like to insert those. Those are what they do for their own publications, but for a thesis, it needs to be just numbers. No running headers. Table titles go above the table and figure captions go below the figure. This is for everybody, no matter what. Okay. Your references will be hanging indent format if you are a name date sequence person. If you are using numbers, like superscript numbers, then they'll just be numbered. The note here is about the hanging indent. Sometimes I get different types of indentations, or they're all flush. Make sure they're hanging indent format. Okay, so for the standard format, this is the order in which everything will be happening in your paper from the start to finish. This is all in the thesis guide if you need to refer back. Well, the first page will be your title page, then your abstract. Some of these things are optional: copyright page, dedication page, acknowledgments, and then the table of contents after that, lists of tables and figures, optional whether or not you have those or not. If you have more than 5 entries, you do not, if fewer than 5 entries, you do not need to have a list of tables or figures. If you have more than 5, then make sure you have a list. So that's up to you. If you have 1 entry, don't do it. Two is fine, again, it's up to you, but 1, leave it out. Then there's the body of your manuscript, and then your references, appendices if you have them, and then the vita at the end. Okay, so that's the flow. If following the alternate format, everything's the same, but there's, except for a few things in the middle. Chapter 1 will be an introduction, a comprehensive review of the topic of literature, including a statement of hypothesis. Chapter 2 will be a journal article. This is for specific disciplines. Not all of you all will be using this. Some disciplines are writing in publication format throughout their, again, the word I can't think of, educational career. So they already have journal articles prepared, and this is designed for them to not have to rework those articles to fit them into their thesis. They can just insert them as chapters. So chapter 2 will be 1 journal article for a thesis, or a series of journal articles for a dissertation, and they are separate numbered chapters. Okay. Dissertations must have a final chapter. Your thesis advisory committee may or may not require that, so that's not required for a thesis, but dissertations must have a final integrated chapter. One other thing for the alternate format, because these articles are standalone articles, they already have their figures or tables numbered. Instead of having to redo those numbers throughout, you can just tack on a chapter by chapter numbering system. So chapter 1, you just have a decimal system throughout for 1.1, 1.2. Chapter 2's figures 2.1, 2.2, etc. That's the only difference there. Okay, follow the sample pages in the thesis dissertation guide exactly for the title page. There's sample pages, example pages in the guide. They're toward the end of the guide. Follow those exactly. The abstract, to note here is that the paragraphs are unindented. It's a cataloging thing, so for each paragraph in your abstract, do not indent the first line. Give an extra space between each paragraph. And for a thesis, 150 words or less, I will be counting. Dissertations, 350 words or less. Again, cataloging issue there. Be sure you follow the example of the table of contents. Look at all these before you get started. List of tables and figures. Follow the format that's in the guide. Your vita, you all probably have been working on a resume or vita, or curriculum vita so far. Rework it to match our example. It is different. So the spacing, how it's laid out, is different than probably what you have. You need to rework what you have to fit our example and make sure it's no more than 2 pages. Okay, so it's like just an educational snapshot of you. It's not everything you've ever done, and the most recent and relevant information. Okay, headings and subheadings. Talk about that next. This is a general guide that we have in our thesis guide for all disciplines. And this is what we want to see. The chapter heading is in all caps and centered, and the subheadings they can either be underlined or italicized. First level subheading is centered, second is flush with the left margin, and third is in sentence style followed by a period and not in title case. So that's a general guideline. If you're using APA, however, we have a blend. We have a compromise, I suppose. If you are using APA most of the time, let me back up. APA offers 5 levels of subheadings, and that's why they have their own style. Most disciplines don't need more than a first, second, and third level of a subheading, but they offer up to 5. So if you are using that, this is the APA blend, the chapter heading will still be in all caps and centered, and then you start the APA format style after that. So the first level will be centered and bolded, and so forth and so on down the line. Okay. Okay. So as far as the departmental style guide, that's APA, CSE, ASA, MLA, all of those, I will be checking in-text citation formatting. I'll be checking your tables and figure captions, and then your references, just to make sure you followed those guides in your discipline. You are responsible for writing in the style of your discipline, grammar, punctuation, and sentence structure. We used to have a reader that would read all of this and help us out, but it is up to you and your committee to get this right. I don't do this, okay? I don't look for this stuff. Chapter organization and flow, ensuring quoted and paraphrased material is cited. That's what the Turnitin report will help you with. And clarity and continuity. So that's all up to you and your committee to get that right before it comes to me. Okay. All right, so what it's going to look like when I do give you notes, and you will get notes. Not everybody's perfect. Nobody has ever been perfect. There'll be sticky notes in your Acrobat file, and they'll look similar to this. And I will send the PDF back to you via email. Okay. You'll make your corrections in your Word file, or whichever file you're using, convert back to PDF, and then resubmit via the website or by Digital Commons, by logging in, sorry. You should expect at least 2 rounds. Yeah, 2 rounds. I'll send you comments back, the initial ones. You send me back the corrections. I'll give it one last scan. I usually find something, not always, but expect at least 2 rounds with me. And the most common question is, how long will it take? If you're right there at deadline time, it's going to take weeks, because I've got so many. I've got 40 to 60. Actually, this last spring I had 90. Okay, so it gets a little crazy. That's why I encourage you to submit at different times of the year, so I can get you done in 3 days if you're submitting in February. But if it's deadline day, you're going to get bogged down with everybody else. Okay. And of course, if your paperwork is holding you up, that'll slow the process as well. All right, final approval. Once you've gone through me, there's one more check. Dr. Kirkby will look over the final manuscript for approval. He's going to be reading your acknowledgments. He's not going to be doing anything detailed. However, he has an eagle eye, so he will find something. I've had assistant deans not find a whole bunch. They've gone through very smoothly. Everyone I send him, he finds something. So it's his, personality, and I appreciate that. But he will always find something, even if it's just a semicolon. He'll find something. But that's the final one, and it's not hugely detailed. Once you get approval from him, he'll notify me, and I will process the approval. You'll get an automated email sent from Digital Commons that tells you, congratulations, you're all done, good to go. Okay, so deadlines, the initial deadline, and like I said, this semester it's November 13th. That's about 4 weeks prior to graduation. If you're following that final deadline flow, it's going to be about 4 weeks prior to graduation. The final deadline to have gone through me and have Dr. Kirkby's approval is going to be about 3 days before graduation. I get most students done a week prior to that. I don't like things getting to the last minute. It makes me itch. So 3 days prior to graduation, so this deadline will be December 13th because commencement is December 16th. That is this semester's flow. So we got about 4 weeks, and it takes all of that time to get through because I've got so many of you. But you must have approval through Dr. Kirkby before the final deadline to graduate. Okay? That's exhausting. Every time I do this workshop, it makes me tired. But I'm a nice person, and I'm here for you. And get my card on your way out. Those of you online, send me an email anytime. It's a lot to handle. You are preparing your manuscript for defense, and then you're defending, and that's exciting. And then you start this, and it's, you know, there's a lot. So if you forget something, if you get confused, let me know. I'm here for you. You're not bothering me. Okay? And there's my information. I do have 2 different emails. I'll be sending and receiving the large documents through the ETD email, so that's me also. That's just to keep my inbox from getting totally cluttered. But that's it. Any questions? Okay. All right, for those of you online, also send me or send Rebecca emails and me also. And that's it. Thank you.